my name is Paddy Young from Inlit Europe. It's my pleasure on behalf of Eurelectric and Oracle to welcome you to the Public Power Talk, which is looking at Generation XYZ, how to adapt to the generation shift and the new digital and social customer. Today, we're going to be looking at basically the impact that the next 10 years in most European countries, the population demographic of the energy customers is going to shift towards a younger, more digital, more social group. The industry has been too slow in recognizing this shift, and with the emergence of renewables, renewable generation storage, EVs, and new market entrants, there is a real chance that legacy organization, legacy channels, business models, will become redundant. Really not relevant to this new and growing customer base. Oracle Utilities and Eurelectric, today we're going to look at this and discuss the ramifications and the solutions going forward. Now, first on the agenda, we're starting the day with a presentation from Mike Ballard, Vice President Utilities Industry and Strategy at Oracle. He's going to present some research that Oracle have undertaken. Some very interesting findings will be coming out. After that, we're going to be joined by a panel and discuss these findings and really look at those in more detail. So, Mike, welcome.
Well, thank you, Paddy. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really happy to be sharing these insights with Eurelectric. We've seen in Oracle a year of significant change, unplanned change, both in terms of affordability and the impacts that COVID has had on end consumers. What we really wanted to understand is how has the world changed? How has the consumers' priorities changed as a result of the last year? And so we wanted to run a new set of surveys to understand different consumer priorities. So we've run a survey to 2,500 end consumers, equally spread across 5 countries: the UK, France, Spain, Canada, and the United States. We asked more than 100 questions to those respondents. And our questions were focused on 3 key areas. The first is around affordability, and how has the issues of people being unable to work and higher bills been impacting customers. We asked the question about sustainability, and because of the distractions and the other priorities that people have had to contend with this year, have their attitudes to sustainability changed, and what are their plans in terms of supporting sustainability goals? And the third area we wanted to talk about was in the area of engagement, which is really covering the perception that consumers have of the industry and what the role the industry should be playing in supporting the outcomes of end consumers. So these were the kind of 3 areas that we were focused on. We had no plan to particularly look at Generation Z. What we found, though, was when we analysed this data across lots of different demographic group types, it was actually the age demographic that overwhelmingly had differing response rates. And you can see a few here on this slide. But if we move forward now, it becomes quite obvious that, and I think to many, that Generation Z have a different set of priorities, that they have a different attitude generally. So, this is obviously important because as time moves on, that generation becomes larger and larger as a consumer base in the industry. They become more influential. They become, they own more capital. They spend more of their income on energy-related matters. And so it is really important for the industry to be understanding that growing group better, and to adjust their strategies to maintain relevance to the industry. So the first area we asked questions around was one around affordability, and this is particularly important right now because we've seen over a year now of issues of unemployment, people being asked to stay at home, and those combinations drive financial stress to consumers. And what we have found, we actually asked a very specific question, which was, have you been unable to pay your energy bill for the first time? And it was Generation Z that overwhelmingly was suffering from this challenge of for the first time being unable to pay their bills. In fact, in France, it was a very large proportion, and significantly 10 times greater was that impact to the over 55s in France. And it's not just the absolute issue of being unable to pay the bill for the first time or bills going up, but also very much about by how much did it increase. And when we recognise that the proportion of income that is being spent on energy bills by younger, who are earning potentially less, this impact of being required to stay at home when they're not earning and having higher energy bills means that they're being impacted, not only being unable to pay the bill for the first time, but actually those bill increases are more significant than they are in the older generations. And in fact, the age of debt, the amount of time that they are unable to pay the bills for, is also significantly longer, anywhere up to 3 to 5 months. They're having to sort out their debt issues. And so when we then look at the view from the end consumer about what is the industry doing to help, we asked the question about what relief is your energy company providing you at this challenging time. And 66% of our 2,500 respondents said that they weren't aware that their energy company was doing anything to support them during this time. They weren't providing tips to help them lower their bills. They weren't helping provide payment arrangements to spread their payment plans out, and certainly not providing financial support. But what was also surprising to me was not just the lack of awareness, because I know many utilities are trying to find ways to support customers. But what was also very interesting was the proportion that felt they were caught off guard by these increases. 37% of customers didn't get warning from their customers. And I asked the question, having been in the industry myself since I left school many years ago, was is this something that we could have anticipated? I know many utilities provide high bill alerts, but I think the question here is when the bills are increasing, maybe only by 10 or 20%, but the income of that customer has been reduced to potentially zero because they are unable to work. It's that combination that perhaps utility companies could have spotted. And I'll be interested to understand if utilities had done that maths and given advance warning to customers who are staying at home that they were potentially going to be getting bills they couldn't afford. And then the other major standout statistic for me is this 46% that said that their bill increases meant that they had to reduce spending elsewhere to cover it. And when we dig deeper into that and we actually look at by how much were these bills impacting day-to-day life, we see again in that younger generation significant impact, actually not just having to reduce discretionary spending to cover their bills, but actually having to reduce spending on essentials like their grocery bills in order to cover their energy bills. And the proportion of Generation Zs that were suffering in that way was significantly greater than those older generations. So that was a stark reminder of the reality that our younger been living with in the last year. But I want to move to a more optimistic narrative here, which is our survey also looked into the issue of sustainability. And we wanted to understand whether the attitude of sustainability, especially around carbon and decarbonisation, had changed. We asked a very specific question, asking if all respondents felt that their carbon footprint was more important to them now than it was 12 months ago. And firstly, the response overwhelmingly across all generations was that it was either as important or more important. I think only 3% across all 2,500 said that it was less important. But it was the nearly 80% of Generation Z respondents that said it was more important to them now than it was 12 months ago. And that's despite all of the distractions, the challenges of health and of family and of finding work. Despite all of that, they, overwhelming support said it was more important for them than it was 12 months ago. And so they could ask the question of, if it's more important to, the vast majority of customers, what are the energy providers doing to meet that, to discuss it? And so we look at the top of this chart here, where you say, has your energy provider mentioned your carbon footprint at all? Does it help you reduce your carbon footprint? And you see that 64% disagreed that their utility company had actually mentioned it at all, and 87% disagreed that their energy company had helped them reduce their carbon footprint. So we asked the question: if it's that significant to customers, why do they not feel that their energy companies are providing sufficient support? Because they're certainly willing to pay for it. If we look at the chart just below there, 79% of Generation Z were willing to pay 10% or more on top of their energy bill in order for it to come from a clean source. And in fact, 30% of those respondents were willing to pay more than 25% on top. And that's despite the fact that a vast majority of Generation Zs have seen an impact on their energy bills, and yet they're still willing to pay more for it. And again, proportionally to compared to those older generations, it's clear that it's our Generation Zs and millennials that are committed. They're committed to to sustainability and to decarbonisation, and are willing to sacrifice for it. Not just in the area of paying higher bills, but there are many other ways in which the industry is trying to drive carbon out of our energy footprints. One of them is around direct load control, the ability to control, for the industry to be able to control devices at the home, whether it's a smart thermostat, whether it's an EV charging point, or a solar inverter, to help balance the network, to drive a demand away from some of those periods where renewable generation may be not at its peak. And it was a significant, nearly half of customers, Gen Z customers, were willing to sign up to some form of direct load control. Over 50% would sign up for time of use rates that would help encourage and bring price into changing energy demand profiles. And then when we ask that kind of classic question of, would you install solar panels in the next 5 years? Nearly 50% said that they would. Gen Z said they would do that. And so, this is again showing that this generation is fully committed and is planning to, when they can, when the time is right, when their living situation is correct, that they are prepared to make those, not just the incremental payments on their bills, but they're actually willing to commit to those capital projects, or to lease panels on a remote farm. What I did want to do was just to show you, for full transparency, the other end of that question, when we look at not just who is prepared to install in the next 5 years, but who are not, and why. What is stopping customers right now from installing solar panels? And it is interesting that that in our 2,500 respondents, that 27% of over 55 said they had no intention of installing solar panels, even if they were more attractive, easy to maintain, or cheaper to do so. Another part of that decarbonisation is around decarbonising heat, whether it's in cooking or in heating of the home. And again, more evidence that the Generation Z are actively planning to convert their gas appliances to electric appliances that can then be powered through renewable energy. And again, that difference, that line, your continuous line you see from generation to generation, that shows that it's our younger generations that are leading the charge here. And so my final my final area was when we're asking these questions of, affordability and about sustainability. The final part of this is about how are your utilities helping you, achieve these priorities and achieve these goals? What areas do you want your energy company to be supporting you in? And the areas of energy efficiency is the top respondents across all of our groups. And this fundamentally because it has two outcomes. First is it helps reduce bills, and it also helps reduce consumption and therefore reduce carbon footprint as well. But all of those other areas that also encourage more efficient use of energy, whether it's putting smart thermostats in, whether it's insulating homes fully and properly, whether it's taking inefficient appliances out and replacing them, they are expecting, the consumers across all age groups are expecting energy companies to help them do that, to identify the priority areas and to identify alternative sources. But the perception that consumers have of the industry actually doing that is not great. And I think this is, for me, the main message for me is that we have a very engaged customer base there. I think many know this through other sources, but there is a lot more work that our industry can do in making sure that we are partnering and working with consumers to help achieve their outcomes. With 1/5 of respondents not aware that their utility company was even helping them reduce bills, was providing any flexibility around payment arrangements, certainly not proactive to the needs of consumers. So I think there's a lot of room for our industry to, if we are doing this work, make sure that that work is accessible to consumers. And when we look at this question around satisfaction and asking more of energy companies, it's clear again that it's those younger generations that have higher expectations, and whether it's to do with your channels that you're using or the timeliness of your engagement, rather than customers having to seek out the answers to their questions, for the energy industry to understand the priorities and the needs of each of their customer groups, and providing them the perfect channel, the perfect communication at the right time, based on the individual needs of those consumers. So when I bring up this slide and we look at the mix of channels, for example, on the right hand side there, I'd like to ask the question of the industry of what type of provider are you? When you look at your portfolio of investments, particularly around the challenge you're providing, are you over investing in telephony when in fact it's mobile apps that are the growing need? Do you have the same level of focus, and are your strategies focused in the right areas when you're trying to engage the group of customers that have the biggest affordability challenges and are your most strongest advocates around sustainability is in your Gen Z? So are you actually investing sufficiently in those areas to support those groups that need the most help and are going to be the most influential in meeting those sustainability goals? And when we talk about choice, we talk about relevance of the industry participants. If you take the price equation out in terms of bills being cheaper and people switching just due to price, when we normalize that out and we say, well, actually price is largely market driven, wholesale market driven, you then have to look at the other areas in which you're going to drive consumer behavior. And of course, execution, such as billing problems, but execution on service is important. But providing the right channels and providing renewable and low carbon energy sources will become increasingly important, and to the point of disqualifying certain companies out from an entire generation if you're not seen to be delivering the right sustainable outcomes for customers. This final slide is really just a reminder that this is not a one-time phenomenon. It isn't a special class. It's the latest group that are coming through and who have have sustainability and climate at the heart of their, of their culture, of their being. They are far more connected than in my generation. I'm a Gen X, but it is when you start looking at the generation alphas. These are those that are born between 2010 and 2024. They're going to be even more connected, permanently connected. They're not going to be walking around doing everything one-handed, as my children are doing at the moment, but with the mobile phone in one hand and trying to do everything else one-handed with the other. They'll be permanently connected, and they will be, again, increasingly social. They will move more frequently. They'll change careers more often. They will, the issue of climate will be even more important to them as they are having to live through the consequences of temperature increases. So, what I would like to sort of finish off with is just to remind our industry that there is a disconnect between what customers believe and want and think of their utilities and what utilities at large are actually doing. So you really need to look hard about whether you're actually meeting the needs and the outcomes of your shareholders or of your end consumers. I think I want to take away here is that despite being hardest hit by economic factors of the pandemic, our youngest generation are overwhelmingly in support of green energy and willing to pay more for it. That, I think, should not be a surprise to anybody watching this broadcast. But the energy providers really need to be creating strategies that serve these specific age groups. It's clear that age drives different sets of needs, and I believe that many utilities are not actually focusing their business strategy and engagement strategies based on age at all. And the last piece really is just to listen to those consumers, listen to this panel, get some great ideas, get inspired by some of the work that is happening, so that we can all move forward in our decarbonisation and affordability goals, both as an industry and to support the community at large. So thank you very much for your time.
Great, thanks very much for that, Mike. A very interesting bit of research there, and I know that it's going to be available for everybody very shortly. So I'm sure with Mike's contact details there, you'll be able to reach out if you want to get a copy of that. But fascinating. Okay, now we'll move on to the next stage of today's Public Power Talk, and that's when the panel come in to discuss these to discuss the research. I'd like to introduce, first of all, Ana Paula Marquez. She's a board member and president of EDP Innovation. We have Darius Megstanas, chair of the board, CEO of the Ignitus Group. Daria Mustafayeva, who's advisor on retail markets for Euroelectric, and with the big job of representing Generation Z, Annabel de Gelderen, who is an investment advisor at Energy Investment Management. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and what a lineup. Really looking forward to this. Okay, let's kick things off. I have to say it was a fascinating research and quite shocking in one way, from affordability, the sustainability element, but also the shortfall potentially on engagement. Generation Z was the hardest hit, but represents the biggest opportunity, and the connection to sustainability is very strong. So I'd like to start with Anna. Does the increase in awareness and prioritization of decarbonisation in the younger demographic, does that surprise you?
Hello, thank you for the invitation, for being here today. And I also would like to thank Mike for the excellent presentation we had with a lot of insight. In fact, it's not really surprising, because Gen Z's behavior is really based on the motivation they have to find truth and authenticity. And I would highlight from what we have seen today some conclusions on how Gen Z is looking at our sector. The first thing is that Gen Z sees climate change as the biggest threat for next decade. And we are able to see that in multiple studies. The second thing is that really this generation is keen on taking more responsibility to find solutions. They play an active role, and they are really expected to do that. The third thing I find interesting is that government regulations are necessary, but Gen Z really expect us as corporations to take equal responsibilities on acting in these type of situations. So they expect even more proactive approach from companies. And they are doing more and more to be green. They discuss these type of issues with their friends and family, and a high percentage of them posts information and shares information online. In many circumstances, there is another point that is Gen Z even boycotts companies which are not sustainable. So they have, I would say that I've seen a recent study that says 31% of this generation say they have in the past boycotted companies that did not behave sustainably. So it's really changing the way that companies are acting. And also, I would say that all in all, Gen Z is clearly a green generation, and they are expecting companies to do much more. And this type of issues is becoming more central in the way they act and they behave. And therefore, I don't think it's a surprise. But I was, I must say, surprised with some of the numbers that I've seen in Mike's presentation that were quite interesting.
No, thank you very much for that. And it was interesting you using the term responsibility and the responsibility of corporations. I'd like to ask the same question to Darius, please. Darius, what's your view? Were you surprised, or does it not surprise at all?
As a father of 3 Gen Z daughters, I'm not surprised at all. Good focus group at home helps me on making the decisions. And actually, the climate consciousness and feeling responsibility of fast action, of urgency to make a change, it's very present among this generation. And while they are not a core users for us today, they are not decision makers, usually are not buyers or not even bay pillars today, but they care a lot. And that means that looking forward, when they come, we have to build our brand, our positioning, our value propositions, our products and business models to be in line with their values and their view of world. And in this case, we have to be very authentic again. It's not enough to be across ads. You have to deliver green energy. You have to act sustainably. And what we do, we are just focusing all our strategy, but we are climate tech, renewable company, which is bringing new things to the future. So being across the relevant touch points to have meaningful conversations with with that generation, it's really crucial.
No, thank you very much, Darius. That's interesting that the move from product to brand, that connection is going to become increasingly important. And it's interesting you using the word authenticity, authentic. Again, I think this is going to be a recurring theme. Daria, just moving on to you. What is your take on this?
Yes, I agree with Darius and Anna, of course, because I think this new generation is truly the generation that chose climate change and sustainability as their cause. So we can see that from early age in the political engagement on those issues, and also in the engagement, of course, on social media, being much more active on those issues. And I agree completely that it should go beyond, let's say, just statements, but also concrete actions on the part of the industry, and this is what is expected. But what these new generations are actually looking for, and I'm the representative, I guess, of Generation Y, can also confirm that, is for a true partnership from the industry, truly to support the customer, because they do want to be drivers of this transition. And it's a great opportunity for the industry and for our society to become more sustainable, because people are much more aware now. And we should not miss this opportunity. We should really step up and become true energy partners for the customers.
Yeah, and I think again that's also this partnership aspect with customers is very interesting. It's easily said, but obviously developing that is another thing. And moving on, the same question to Annabelle. Obviously, are you surprised with the outcome of the research?
So I am a Generation Z myself. So I am not surprised by this outcome, and I'm also involved in a master's. So I'm studying global business sustainability. So I could really say that the people I am interacting with and my peers in this study are all very into sustainability. So yeah, I'm not surprised by this, and I really also see myself that our generation is very engaged on various aspects of sustainability, really trying to advocate and raise awareness and act upon many issues. I would say that I believe the topic of energy is rather still a bit less familiar with many of the people I engage on other topics of sustainability. So I think energy still has a lot to be done in terms of addressing younger generations. And yeah, the topic is less familiar, for example, in my master's study. But I do see a lot of potential and lots of developments to be done in terms of addressing Generation Z. And yeah, for sure, this demographics category is going to play a big role in this field in the coming years.
Yeah, super. Now that's very interesting, Annabelle, particularly the fact that it's not as high a profile as other areas in sustainability, and I find that quite a surprise, because obviously energy is central in industry, in buildings, with the decarbonisation goals. So I think that shows a shortfall in potentially marketing, I'd say. So that's really fascinating. I think I'll move on to another question, and this seems a real opportunity. There's a group that want to be engaged. They want to make a difference, and I know that if you look at across the customer base for utilities, it's a broad customer base, and everyone needs to be catered for. And I'd like to ask Darius, what are you currently offering? What programs do you have? What campaigns are you running that really are for this group?
What we found that in order to be relevant and attractive for this group, we have to dig deep a bit into the lifestyle. And the lifestyle usual in this situation, many Gen Z, they do not have long-term commitments. They do not have properties. They are living in the rented apartments or changing living place quite frequently. On the other hand, they would like to contribute to the climate, maybe to install solar panels or be a part of it. And here we came to the conclusion that we have to learn a bit from the IT industry and to see if we can propose completely different business models and propositions which are relevant for Gen Z. As an example, we made a remote solar panel in the cloud solution when a customer having or renting an apartment can buy or rent a remote solar panel via internet, just via 5 seconds. So that was kind of a pilot project for us or innovation project for us. We were expecting that first megawatt of this solar panel in the cloud will be bought maybe over several weeks, and it took for us 2 days to be sold out. So we learned a lot that business models and convenience to contribute and convenience to use the product, it's very, very relevant and very important. And also variety of different communication channels are also very important as well. Gen Z, at least from my focus group, they don't use email. email is for old people, and also to read if you accepted to university, and we use the messaging, and mobile screen is the #1 device, etc., etc. So a lot of things to take care and while developing communication and products as well.
Great, very interesting indeed, and. But it is a case, and I'm very curious, Daria, from sort of a Euroelectric perspective, are you looking at the sort of retail markets and consumers? Do you see a sort of differentiation in strategies of age groups across the age groups from the sector, or would you say there's a lot of work to be done there?
So we are actually currently looking into this. We're looking into different strategies from our members. Is as a follow-up to the first phase of our project called 15 Pledges to Customers. That project, the first phase of it, we have presented last year, and we signed 15 pledges by almost 100 retailers covering 200 million customers. And in the second phase, we're really trying to dig deeper and understand how those pledges have been transformed into concrete actions. So this is what we're trying to do at the moment. So we are looking at different strategies by our members. So I can say that, of course, currently they're focusing on the new products. And I think this is of something really of interest for Generation Y and Z. So new electric solutions, new products, digital solutions are those that are in demand for those generations, but also trying to improve their experience overall, trying to making it more transparent and straightforward, and to make sure that information is really there and it's easily reachable. So our first interim results from the two surveys that we're conducting, one of them is company survey, another is consumer survey, shows that, for example, 90% of the companies that signed those 15 pledges are really committed, and this past year they have considerably increased their offer of new services that are also targeting, of course, younger generation, but also they are planning to continue to do so. They already embedded those products in their strategies going forward. As for customers, their response so far is mixed. So we are just getting our first results now. So I can't really reveal everything, but I can say that we still see a little bit of a gap in terms of the information. They would like to have clearer information from their supplier. And I think this is one of those things where we really have to work further, because I feel like especially for the younger generation, this is an important point, that the communication should be very straightforward and very clear.
No, very, very interesting. So work is being done, and again, it is a case of accelerating this process. I get the feeling, particularly with looking at in the light of the results that were given from the questionnaire. Okay, I'd like to move on now, really, and to have some questions now for Annabelle and Generation Z. How do you feel as a consumer that the energy companies, how do they engage with you? Are you happy? The report says that you would rather a more proactive approach.
Yes, indeed. So from my personal experience, I'm studying in the Netherlands, and I'm using some energy from a Dutch company. But from my personal experience and my peers, I think we really don't see energy companies as being proactive enough. First of all, in terms of the way they communicate with us, the information is not clearly communicated. Often there is a language barrier as well, because lots of students in the Netherlands are international, and energy companies rather communicate in Dutch only. We don't really have any insights of the electricity consumption we use, or on how to, for example, use more energy more efficiently, or go for greener alternatives. So I really think that there is a disconnect between Generation Z consumers, so mostly students and energy companies. And I think there could be lots of improvements done. For example, we are very connected, and we are a generation that is very digital. So providing more information, for example, through an app, and centralizing all the information about our energy consumption and our footprint, and how we could use energy and electricity more efficiently, that could really be solutions to engage with the Generation Z consumers. So really bringing forward and bringing more transparent information about the energy consumption and our emissions, and also advices on how prices are fluctuating, and how we could have, we could reduce our expenses, especially with COVID and the struggle of paying bills. So yeah, I believe there is improvement to be done in terms of how energy companies communicate with Generation Z.
Very interesting. I think there's a lot of marketers in the audience scribbling very assiduously on their notepads there. But I think it is interesting, and I'm lucky enough. I'm a marketer, but I'm lucky enough to have contact with a lot of utilities, and there's lots of fabulous work being done around innovation. And if you see what's happening, and I miss sometimes that connection to the consumer. And if people, when I talk to friends about the sector, they always think of the utility as the people that send the bill. And then if I talk to about what is actually happening, and the connections, the interface with other markets, it's a lot more interesting. So there's some miss in communication there. And that's a question I'd like to ask to Anna. Obviously heavily involved in innovation. I have to say EDP is a very strong innovator in my opinion. How do you connect that with a consumer, or don't you?
I think it's quite interesting from what we've heard here today, because we are seeing that this generation really sees consumption as an expression of their individual identity. And at the same time, they see consumption as a matter of their sustainability concern. And when I hear Mike on his presentation saying that energy partners of tomorrow will be sources of information and support, and at the same time, I hear Annabelle as a representative of this generation to say that we should all concentrate this in an app. I think that when you are innovating and creating new communities, it's important to really reinforce companies' positioning on promoters of this sustainability, and at the same time to really promote digitalization and self-care through integrated digital experiences that, as Annabelle mentioned, it's really, really important for this target. And what I see is that EDP, especially in our very recent presentation in our Capital Markets Day, we have firmly submitted the commitment of being all green by 2030. And when we are innovating, we are already creating alternatives such as our Planet Zero campaign, where we are really developing a community among users for environmental awareness and about the needs of decarbonization. And I would highlight one example that is EDP Ready, a product that was developed among business units and innovation, that is really a product that allows you to monitor your energy use and the solar energy output, as well as the use of the energy that we generate. And it analyzes the usage pattern of consumers and notifies the end user if it detects higher than expected consumption, alerts us if our home is without power, and alarms us in the event of device failures within our house. And I would highlight this example because it's really about providing information and support to the end users. And of course, Gen Z values much more than other age groups the fact that you provide them an integrated and digitalized experience, as Annabelle mentioned.
No, sounds this development of community. I think that's something we'll see more of, and I also believe it's pretty essential to create a movement to take the decarbonisation forward. So I think that Planet Zero, was that the?
Planet Zero is the global campaign that we are launching, and this app in particular, this type of product is EDP Ready.
Okay, fantastic. Very, very interesting. Okay, Mike, just a question for you. Obviously, sorry, been a little bit.
It's fascinating. I much prefer to listen than to talk, to be honest. But
well, I'm going to ask you one question then. Obviously, Oracle has experience across the board. It's a large corporation, very well respected. Are you able to utilize that experience to help develop product that will help the utility sector in this situation?
Without this turning into a sales pitch,
yeah, I'm sorry, that was a little bit. It was my curiosity. I'm sorry.
I'm going to try and answer it as uncommercially as I possibly can. So the answer to that question is we do this a lot. I think Anna's described a very critical standard really that we should be meeting all customers in terms of helping educate all customers about why they are consuming energy, when they're consuming it, and give everybody assistance in identifying ways they can reduce their carbon footprint, how they can reduce their bills. That is, that everybody should be doing that all the time, and we should have been doing it for years. So, Oracle's been, has our O-Power solution, which we required a number of years ago, has led the market in that. In fact, we have over 26 terawatt hours saved through this platform that helps people understand where energy is being used. And again, that idea of it being that consumption is both an expression of people's lifestyles, but it's also an expression of sometimes of guilt. It's guilty consumption. We don't want to consume as much as we want to. We want to consume less. We want to find those ways of conserving it. So I think the other area that I would, I think Oracle is interested in is how, once you've got those insights and you take all of that usage data from your smart meters, from your demographic data, from appliance data, and some of the connected devices that give you a little bit more, you are now able to disaggregate that and actually understand, on individual homes where they are most likely consuming energy. But the real trick is the insight is data, and that's actually becomes commoditized quite quickly. The analytics gets commoditized quite quickly. What is actually really hard to do is to drive the behavioral science that will then nudge the changing in behavior, to be able to connect that insight to something that somebody can do differently, and to be able to sell the idea that changing your behavior or investing in this particular energy efficient device or energy like a smart thermostat or something is worthwhile doing, both from an economic standpoint and from a sustainability standpoint. So I think that the real challenge is going to be in the future, how do you communicate that and to get the outcomes that the end consumer really wants, and do that differently to a Generation Z individual versus somebody who's retired and has a completely different set of priorities.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Sorry for putting you on the spot there. It was a genuine curiosity that led to that question. So I have another question. I think this is for Darius, because I see it in other sectors, and I think the banking sector years ago, maybe showing my age a little bit here, but once you opened up a bank account for your child, you got a package through, and it was a real moment. And in many instances, that moment made a huge impact on that child, and the loyalty that was generated, and the feel for the brand itself. And I think that emotional feeling of a brand is essential in this. It's not about product or marketing; it's that emotional connection. But Darius, do you work on those sort of magic moments that you hope will keep this Generation Z, who's frequently on the move, loyal to your brand?
Yes, we are trying hard, and I think again we have to think about the relevance. It should be relevant messaging and propositions. Again, this Gen Z currently they most probably they are again choosing or already choose the future profession or the jobs or thinking about what they will do in their life. And here we see really opportunity for energy sector actually to be quite intensively across the universities, to communicate much more about all the innovations what we do, and to talk more about climate tech and digital energy and provide quite clear examples how the future works of energy companies will look like. Facts like we have currently on our stuff, we have more IT people rather than electricians. We have twice more digital robots rather than accountants. So it's completely high-tech business, or turning to high-tech business already. Worth to consider for the future, for yourself, for your profession. One angle. Another angle is we try to be really focused also on the changes what are happening in the mobility. Starting from scooters to shared electric car fleet, etc. We try to be the branded propositions, with green energy propositions across all the city scooters, that they are all powered by green energy from Ignitis, etc. So many angles. There is not just one magic moment while receiving first account. Maybe worth to think about. Maybe it could be a virtual solar panel as the gift that reached 18 years. We will contemplate on that, which you can carry for many years from one flat to another. We'll think about. But again, it has to be meaningful and relevant, not just high words or nice pictures. Probably that's how we try to approach it.
And again, not just nice words and pictures. Going back to that authenticity aspect, Darius, and I think again, authenticity is going to be like a superpower going forward, particularly with large corporations. Okay, again, the points that you made there was like several moments, several products to make an impact. Daria, do you see this at Eurelectric, the fact that there's portfolio of products? Where do you enter? Maybe EV charging. It could be the solar panels. Whereabouts do you see utilities sort of making a bridgehead to secure clients?
Yes, I would agree as well that there's not just one moment. I think it's all about a relationship and keeping it real, authentic, and really supporting the customer along the way. Not only getting the contract at the beginning and then switching to something else. I feel like from what we see at Eurelectric, and our main point is, of course, to raise awareness about all these issues, is that customers are especially interested, of course, in PVs, in energy efficiency in particular. So we also see this in the presentation by Mike, that customers are really, they would like to hear more about how they can cut the costs of energy and how they can have their consumption more energy efficient. I think this is where we step in as the industry to really provide that advice in the best way possible. And we will, of course, gather the data from the current surveys and make long-term conclusions. I think on the basis of those conclusions, what's important to do is to embed them in the strategies for the years to come, so that we really can build a true relationship and support the customer along the way.
No, very, very good point. That embedding those aspects in the relationship, I think, certainly resonates with me. Anna, you painted a very vivid picture about EDP and the approach with community creation. Do you have any final words or opinions to add to this sort of multi-moment approach to keeping and attracting and keeping clients?
I would highlight that we really need to have like a global ecosystem that is fully aligned in order to develop these new solutions. To develop really an holistic perspective where we have to have companies, governments, institutions, regulation, education, technology. Everything has to be aligned in order for us to move forward as an ecosystem. And in our perspective as a company, the combination of hybrid storage, mobility, solar, and EDP is at the forefront of developing these mixes. It is very important, of course, that these solutions have their maturity curve, and to make these solutions affordable for the customer. It is also important that there is education in terms of all the populations. And it is very important that companies keep on, and the energy industry will need really to tell true stories, to be relevant, to be engaging with this target, and to reach out to this generation very quickly in order to stay relevant. I think it was interesting that today we saw that Gen Z really values companies that walk the talk. But we also mentioned Gen Alpha that is coming along. And I would say that Gen Alpha, we will be moving from companies that walk the talk to have companies that really breathe the talk. And this type of authenticity we will need to have in companies is really, really important. And I believe that the sector really needs to be very committed with this generation in order for us to move forward, because they value these type of issues much more than the previous generations.
Yeah, really breathe that one. That's also a very good point, Anna. Okay, we know we're sort of running out of time a little bit here, so I'd like to finish with Annabelle. And you've heard this, you've seen the presentation, you've listened to what people have said. If there was one, maybe two bits of advice that you would give from Generation Z, what would that be if you were talking to the utilities?
Thank you. Yes, as Anna just said, so we can really see that previously, like only front-runner companies were trying to be sustainable, which was kind of a qualifier. But we're seeing that in the future, and especially now with Generation Z, it's going to be a disqualifier actually if a company isn't sustainable, because our generation is now paying so much attention to companies creating long-term value and also addressing sustainable development goals. So my advice for energy companies would really be to understand early enough how to connect and address the needs of Generation Z. So as we said, such a connected generation, we really are used to exchanging data, and there isn't any issue with data privacy because we share a lot of data. So I think a solution would be to really understand the consumer and ask for data and try to address the needs of energy and electricity to these consumers on a personal and a more tailored basis. And then also, of course, integrating and centralizing information through a digital channel, such as an app or like any network that is very used by Generation Z. So I also think that now, because we pay so much attention to ESG integration and also corporate social responsibility, for energy companies, it's going to be important to disclose what they're doing and how they're acting in terms of renewable energy, how they're trying to really switch for greener alternatives. And all these actions are really going to make the difference and make Generation Z want to become consumers and avoid going for other energy alternatives. So overall, I think these are the two advices I would really give.
Wonderful. Annabelle, thank you very much. And I think that's a good point to finish up on. I'd like to thank Mike, Anna, Darius, Daria. Annabelle, thank you very much for this very enlightening session. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And once again, thank you for taking part in the session. And I think to summarize, I think it's clear authenticity is going to be very important going forward. And I think Annabelle's last words there showed that fact. I think we managed to get through the session without mentioning ESG, but I think that is going to become increasingly important. And I think it's not just about Generation Z. We have those other areas to look at. So it's going to be an approach to all of those elements. But I see a lot of innovation. I see a lot of change. I see Generation Z as the group of people that can really make a difference and help accelerate the route towards decarbonisation. I think now as a sector, we really need to accelerate that process and take up the challenge. Thank you very much.